Hey YouTube, this Shock Therapy here, and we've got a brand new Polaris Rzr Turbo S. And I know a lot of you guys have seen other reviews on this car, but we're excited to have gotten one and kind of dig into it and give you a heads up as to what we think some of the best options and items on this car are that really help you when it comes to driving it, and maybe some of the things you would want to think about when it comes to buying it. So some of the biggest items that have been improved on this car from previous years that we think are super important are: first and foremost, the two things that we think are the biggest options on this car is the fact that it's a factory long travel car at 72 inches wide. Normally you would buy one of these and have to spend $4,000 or $5,000 on the long travel. That is not the case here. It comes that way. In addition to that, it's got a factory dynamics shock control on it, and that dynamic system is outfitted to the new aluminum Fox internal bypass. So that's new compared to the previous dynamic systems, where this is an internal bypass like some of the other previous turbos have. This system combined should be amazing. So another key feature on the new Turbo S is the larger 32-inch tires. Now, previous years had a 28 to 29-inch tall tire on them, so this is a considerable jump. It's pretty much what all the aftermarket and customizers are running on their cars, certainly what all the racers are running on their cars. And that ought to tell you a little bit about the tire, because if the racers are running it, then clearly there's an advantage there. The advantage to a larger tire is, the taller it is, the larger the hole is, it'll run right over the top of. A smaller diameter tire might actually fall into a small hole, which you feel. A larger diameter tire will go right over the top of it. So the ride quality is improved, drivability is improved. The only negative to a taller tire is the added weight or horsepower that it might draw to run that tire. And most of the aftermarket people are doing complete clutch kits and tuning the clutch to account for the larger tire. This car has that factory, so you don't have to do any of that. It's a plug and play, get in it and run it and enjoy the 32. Another key feature of the Turbo S that's improved over previous years is the front differential. Now, the average user probably doesn't care too much about that or even worry about their front diff, but as soon as you put some power to the previous cars or you start to race those, you find the weak points in the factory diff. Sprags, armature plates, things like that tend to fail. On the new year, this Turbo S, this is actually a front diff out of this car. There's a lot different about it from the previous years, such as the mounting of the diff. It's hung from the chassis above. Previous years, the diff was bolted to the chassis on the bottom. The negative to the bottom mount system is if you bottom out the car into something, you can actually shear the bolts off, or you can loosen the bolts. The diff will walk around and ruin the chassis and possibly ruin the diff. Other improvements on the inside: dual armature plates, dual spring enactors. Those systems take a lot of the chatter and ratcheting out of the system and makes this diff near bulletproof. We've been working with some of the race teams that run Works and Best in the Desert, and they've had these diffs for a little bit. Previous differentials have lasted one race. This diff on some of the teams have been going 6 races straight. So this is a huge improvement and definitely worth the money. It is clear to us that Polaris has listened to all the race teams that they support, because everything that the race teams are running into when they really beat on the car, some of those items that wear out easily, like control arm bushings, control arm mounting points, sway bar mounting points, those have all been improved, strengthened, and basically set up to where they're trouble-free if you even wanted to race the car. For instance, if you look underneath the car, you're going to see larger diameter control arm bushings. You're going to see supported control arm mounts. You're going to see a ton more structure added to all the sway bar mounting points, both front and rear. These are all small items that the average daily guy is not going to break, but the race teams could have. So kudos to Polaris for listening to everybody and all the information that was given to them and putting that into production. Another item that Polaris has improved on the Turbo S are the rear radius rods. In previous years, they've been fairly weak, and if you run the car really hard or jump it and land a little bit crooked, you could easily bend these radius rods. And once these things go, usually you lose other components in the suspension as well. You might lose the axle, or you might break the lower loop on the shock. Polaris listened. This year, larger hardware, larger joints, massive joints actually, and larger diameter radius rods. These clearly are a giant improvement. It was always something that people worried about. One of the first upgrades that people used to do with their car, because the previous radius rods were so small, is upgrade them to an aftermarket set. You will probably not have to do that on the new Turbo S. These things are large enough to handle it. If cosmetics are important to you, then you will really like the new cage design and also the new front grille and lighting. Everyone's going to know this Turbo S coming from a mile away because of the new visual. But we personally like all the improvements that have been done to this car from a structural standpoint and a performance standpoint. That's really where this is going to shine. Also, if you want to take a look at what all of these things add up to, you're looking at about $7,000 to $8,000 worth of aftermarket accessories that come factory on this car between the long travel, a shock upgrade, and all the other structural items. So there's a large value to this car so that you don't actually have to go and do it yourself. This Turbo S was supplied to us by Ride Now Powersports and Surprise. They have excellent deals on these cars, and if you have a Ride Now in your state, then look them up and they can help you out. If you don't have a Ride Now near you, then go to Polaris.com and look up the closest dealership near you.